Hey, how's it going, guys, and welcome back. So in case you've been living under a rock, Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher is finally out on Nintendo Switch, and while I definitely want to put more time into the game before writing a full-blown review, I did want to give you guys my sort of initial thoughts and how I'm liking it so far, since it's been a common question, and people who want to buy now also want to know if it's any good and how it compares, at least on a surface level, to something like Monster Rancher 1 and 2 DX. I've said this in the past, but I do find that when it comes to playing video games, while the first few hours of gameplay are by no means the entire experience, it can give you a really good feel for the game and introduce you to all of its core mechanics. So while not as in-depth as a full-scale review, these types of videos are still useful for those that don't want to wait potentially weeks for a proper review that wasn't put together haphazardly in an attempt to get the first video out on it. Anyways, justifying the existence of this video aside, let's talk about my first impressions for Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher and why I'm really enjoying it so far. Alright, so one of the first things I've noticed when stepping into Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher for the first time is how much more clean and sharp everything looks in comparison to 1 and 2 DX, which I mean, what could you possibly expect? The DX titles are literally ports from games from the 90s, while this is a 2022 game, but since both are on Switch and act as the only two Monster Rancher titles on the console, I do think it's worth noting that this game definitely feels a lot more modernized than the ports do. You'll see familiar faces from the original games, and their character art has been updated, which is definitely nice, and pretty soon after you're thrown right into the game. Now, how does the game play? It's literally just Monster Rancher with an Ultra Kaiju slab of paint. Now, this is not a bad thing. This is actually very good because if you've played previous titles, you're gonna be right at home, as this new installment takes what we already know, adds kaijus, and then adds a few new systems as well. One of these new systems that I think is really cool is the trait mechanic, which allows you to bake cookies for your kaiju that can give them special traits that are inherent to other kaiju. My one gripe with this feature is that it is pretty much completely random, so it's like gotcha, but with in-game currency, like my buddy Sneck said, but still, the cookies are cheap and it's not like you'll run out of money hunting them unless you're really broke. Anyways, basically these traits instill certain passive effects like increasing the damage of certain moves in combat, making certain types of training net better rewards, giving buffs during certain situations in battle, etc. Not too far off from something like abilities from Pokemon, although in this case you can attach 4 total traits to your monsters, which are unlocked as it gets older. The training drills are pretty similar to what you'd come to expect. There's different drills for different stats, and these drills take a week to complete. You also have the chance to encounter enemy monsters that you can defeat, and you of course have errand trees, which you can go on with unlocked characters this time that take a month, but greatly increase certain stats and even have the potential to net new attacks for your monsters. You have expeditions, or as they're referred to in-game, adventure, where you can explore and uncover new items as well, but all in all, like I said, this is just Monster Rancher with an Ultra Kaiju skin. These are all familiar systems, just with tweaks, and albeit really good ones, like adventures being available any week and the removal of having to freeze your monsters when you want to swap with newly made ones, making it a lot more convenient to create new monsters and experiment with breeding as well. Another nice addition, which for some reason was taken out of the remaster of the original 2 games, is the ability to skip pretty much every cutscene just by tapping A, and on top of that, they kept the fast forward button from 1 and 2 DX, so you can actually have both and play around with them, which is quite nice. They've added an anger stat as well, which can result in your kaiju actually causing problems during its training, like damaging the farm, costing you money, eating all your food, costing you money, or rampaging and getting beaten up by Ultraman himself. What the anger stat does is it increases when it's trained and scolded, but will decrease when resting or praised, and even while competing in tournaments, which sort of adds an extra layer to pushing you into fights. Speaking of fights, battles, much like the original games, feature the semi-real-time combat system where you have to deplete the enemy health bar or have a higher percentage of health upon the end of the battle timer. To do this, you have various skills to choose from, and which skills are executed will depend on your distance from the enemy and whether or not you have enough guts to use said skill. Other than traits, which I did state before can have some differing effects on stats and add passive abilities for your monster, it's pretty standard here. I will say, skills feel like they have a lot more weight behind them in this game than they did in the DX games, and overall just feel a lot more clean. One part of the game that is Western exclusive is the keyword mechanic, which differs from the previous library directory present in the last entry. Instead of choosing a song from a list, you are instead implored to choose keywords and subwords, which will be plopped into Monster Rancher's advanced algorithm and will pop out a monster. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly how the system works, but just know that you can make monsters from any words. If you've played the Game Boy Advance titles, then you'll recognize this mechanic, albeit with 2 sections instead of 1. Another mechanic that they added that I honestly thought would be completely useless in the West was the ability to scan NFC cards, which were intended for these special Ultraman cards that were Japan exclusive. However, we found out that the game is actually compatible with all NFC technology, minus Amiibo for some reason, which allows you to scan your employee badge, your phone, your bus card if it taps, your debit and credit cards if they tap, and apparently even Skylanders and Disney Infinity toys, from what you guys were telling me in the comments. I personally find this way more fun than writing in keywords, as it gives a digital form to your physical everyday items, and unlike CDs, they will actually net different monsters when tapped each time. For example, my work ID would spawn different subbreeds of Scavenger, while my debit card would spawn purebred monsters. While not as abundant as something like CDs, it is nice to see that there is a physical way to add monsters into the game. For those watching this that have never played a Monster Rancher game and don't really know what it's all about but are curious, this is not an adventure JRPG like Pokemon or Nexomon or Coromon. Despite the game's journalists that peddle this as a Pokemon clone, it is actually very unique from it. The game is primarily menu-based outside of battles and adventures, so there is no set world to explore or anything like that. If you're a fan of monster raising games like Tamagotchi or the plethora of Digimon raising games, Monster Rancher sort of sits in that camp where you're taking care of your monster, but you also make it fight in combat, which plays a very pivotal role in the game since you're constantly adding to its stats in order to make it strong enough to fight against higher class monsters. Essentially, you're working your way up the in-game competitive ladder to become the best monster breeder. I know I'm personally not usually into many monster raising games, but Monster Rancher is one of the few exceptions to me, so I also wouldn't write it off entirely because of that. Basically, I want you guys to know what you're getting into because I don't want to see another situation like we saw with Digimon Survive, where people just get upset that the game isn't part of the genre that they prefer. But yeah, so far I'm really enjoying this, much more than DX even, but that's also my personal opinion, so take with it what you will. If you found this video useful or want to include some of your thoughts, definitely let me know down below in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I put out new monster taming videos every single day. You can check out my Twitter, my Discord, and my Patreon, all links below. Special thanks to the patrons, especially Jim Hamilton, Dro Ghost, Dark Persona, and Exodus, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.